Welcome back to the Bank Customer Experience Podcast. I am joined once again by Cook Solutions Group. Always a pleasure to have you on. And I'm joined today by Michael Strange and Levi Daly from Cook Solutions Group. How are you doing today, Michael and Levi?
Great. Thank you.
Good. Thank you so much for having us.
Perfect. So we are talking really about ATM security threats, and we're seeing a lot of that in the news recently. There's been a wave of jackpotting attacks. There's been some attacks that have targeted independent deployers' entire fleet. There's all sorts of things going on right now, even more so than maybe a year ago. But I wanted to start with a very general question. So what would you say are the most common trending ATM security threats?
Well, there's really two that we're seeing right now that stand out from the rest. The biggest one is the RMS attack, or a remote management software attack. And this is where bad actors will compromise a remote management server that has a remote connection to the ATMs, and then utilize that software to change the configuration of the ATM. Once they've changed the configuration, then they're able to mimic a host and approve transactions. And what we've been seeing is they'll remotely connect to the ATMs. They'll turn off TLS 1.2. They'll reconfigure the host IP so that it is pointing to the nefarious server. And now it's kind of like a man-in-the-middle attack. Your ATM thinks it's communicating with a legit host, but it's actually communicating with this bad actor's server. And now you're able to do transactions for any dollar amount that you choose on any account, and you'll get the approval. And then money comes out the other side. We've been seeing this attack quite often, and I think it's something that's a little bit new, at least here in the United States.
Interesting. And I just want to kind of zero in a little bit on why do you think we're seeing a rise in jackpotting again? Because that certainly seems to come and go in waves.
Yeah, and it's funny, we talk about this just kind of like with fashion, right? Everything old is new again, and we see these attacks kind of fade out, and then they come back with a little bit of a different twist. And while we've seen jackpotting in the past, that's kind of a vague term for money magically comes out of the ATM. It's
Sure.
the method with which they do the jackpot that changes. And the RMS type of attack is really highlighting mistakes with just your general cybersecurity type of awareness, with some FIs and servicers, right? Not following best practices. And it really is a clever way to get around any kind of protections on the ATM locally, because this remote management software is manufacturer software. It's not nefarious. There's no malware, there's no virus. This is legit software that the machine is expecting to be there, and it's going through a normal process to reconfigure the machine. So it's a very clever way to get around a lot of those protections on the ATM. And the other, oh, sorry, go ahead.
If I could jump on that too, Michael, we're seeing so many, for years we've seen jackpotting, and the goal is to get the cash out of the machine. There's a lot of cash in these ATMs. So if you can walk away with that cash quickly and easily, they're going to look at every hole or every vulnerability. And it seems to me like for years, the different type of jackpotting that we've seen is physically at that machine. And, ourselves and other companies and ATM manufacturers always it's a cat and mouse game. We always try to come up with something, another way of protecting it. But the RMS one is kind of a new one, right? Because the one RMS attack, some that we've seen over the last few years, is attacks at service providers like us, right? Like we have, I think we service 12 states where we have physical technicians, but then we resell our remote view software nationwide to 20 other companies just like us that service machines. So you look at a company like Cook as a target in a sense, because we have remote software that can access every single machine. And so that RMS attack, attacking a service provider, like a company like us that has that access, it's just a new way of getting to it. Or if a bank or a credit union has their own remote server, right, where they're using that remote server to log into their ATMs, it's no different than an IT department using a remote server to log into their IT devices, their laptops and desktops and servers. Exactly. And so if you can attack that one at the top that has access to potentially thousands of machines, like Michael's saying, and they can send a command, it doesn't look like malware, it doesn't look bad. They can send a command down make this tweak on the ATM, and then the ATMs are vulnerable. Maybe you still physically have to go and get that cash out, but it's a pretty smart way of doing it if they're targeting the service providers that do not have their security buttoned up.
Right. Definitely. Now, are there any specific regions getting hit harder than others in your experience?
We're definitely seeing a trend here, and I don't know that there's a specific region getting targeted, but there's definitely a pattern, kind of moving from south to north. One of the important things to remember: this isn't one of those infinite money glitches that people find on YouTube, and some kids are trying to get free cash. This is organized crime. These are gangs and mobs, both from the United States and abroad. So these are criminal enterprises that are doing this as a business. So they're being methodical with the way that they do it. We've seen a lot of attacks in the Georgia, Texas kind of area. That's sort of where it started, but we're seeing it spread out. We've seen some out here in the Pacific Northwest. We're out here in Portland. So we've seen some in our area as well. And these groups will move throughout the country literally as they get arrested. They'll do the attacks, and somebody will get caught in New Mexico, and then those people get out on bail and they move to Arizona, and we'll see them traverse major interstates. The most common one that we see here on the West Coast is moving up and down the I-5 corridor, again, south to north type of a thing. So we are seeing these attacks nationwide. The most recent have been Georgia, Texas, and then here in Oregon.
Interesting. So I want to get away from just the threats themselves and talk about how do you prevent them. What is a layered defense that could help prevent these type of ATM attacks?
That, like Michael said in the beginning, two types of attacks that we're really seeing. I mean, card skimming and all of these other type of attacks are still there. They're still out there. And so you got to look, just kind of like we talked about, like these bad actors, these criminals, they're very sophisticated, right? It's we kind of make the joke, like we've seen for years and years and years, like you can buy a kit online and then you can go attack a machine, and that's like the freshman crew. This is the varsity team. Like Michael said, these guys are good, and they're getting a lot of money, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars on a lot of these attacks, right? And so you have to take a step back and you have to look at, in a sense, every single vulnerability that's out there, knowing that more are coming, right? Knowing that like they're not going to stop because they're getting money, and so they're going to constantly look at other ways of doing it. We share what we call a layered approach, and at Cook we say we also have our own solutions that we call with a twist, things that we do different, because we are heavy in the ATM space and in the security space. We tie a lot of that together. So from one thing that I wanted to kind of touch on, and I think Michael can add to this, is the RMS attack specifically. The challenge, like we say, it's a black eye to the ATM industry. It for sure is, and the reason we say that is because it's this new vulnerability. You're attacking the IT side of the house, right? And the vulnerabilities that we've seen, or the service providers, the companies that have an RMS server, and bad guys get access to that, and then they can they can connect into up to these thousands of machines. You got to protect your server. You have to go. It's not just the basics, right? I feel like there's a lot of times they spin up a server, you spin it up in cloud. Oh, it's in Azure, it's in Google, it's in AWS. It's safe, it's protected. There are so many layers on the cybersecurity side. Who has access to my server? Do we have a cybersecurity team monitoring the logs and knowing who's logging in and who's doing what? Are we using multi-factor authentication? We've now added so many cybersecurity kind of measures that you have to put in place. That's we have a Cook. We have a SOC audit that kind of shows everything that we're saying we're doing, and we're proving it by sharing a SOC report. But it starts there, and then it goes all the way down to all of the different layered kind of approach and measures on an ATM, like bollards and top hat key changes, and alarming your ATM. And Michael, I don't know if you want to jump in on that, but there's so many layers from top to bottom.
Well,
Yeah.
and when we talk about any kind of fraud or attacks on ATMs, it's that layered approach, right? You've got your cybersecurity for your control servers and your hosted cloud environments and that sort of thing, but you've also got the physical side locally at the ATM, right? Doing stuff like bollards and security gates to help protect
Mhm.
against the hook and chain attacks, and locking your top hat. And that's one where something as simple as changing out the key on your top hat could maybe not prevent, but definitely slow down a bad actor from doing a
Mhm.
man in the middle attack, a hard drive attack, right? Throwing an alarm on that top hat sounds like something super simple, but if I open the top hat and all of a sudden an audible alarm is going off and the cops show up 2 minutes later, that's really gonna hamper my ability to do a hard drive attack on that machine. Um,
Sure.
so even just those simple type of things, increasing your manufacturer protections, right? I know a lot of the manufacturers have bolstered up their mounting plates again to prevent those hook and chain attacks. So it's one of those things where you've got to look at what's the risk that you're seeing, in the wild. What's your budget like,
Right.
to be able to put these safety devices in, and then getting as many layers as you can reasonably afford to help protect yourself from as many threats as possible. With the RMS and these hard drive attacks that are happening, which are the two most popular at the moment. Hard drive encryption is a great one that prevents them from being able
Mhm.
to inject malware or inject software on the hard drive by removing it from the machine. It's a pretty simple way to protect things. One of the others too, man in the middle attacks that a lot of people forget. To Levi's point, these are just your typical cybersecurity threats, your network security. You've got to
Right.
protect your Ethernet cable. You don't want to have a vestibule ATM plugged into a wall jack that's 3 feet away from your ATM, and we've seen those types of things, right? So remembering to
Absolutely.
follow your best practices on just the typical network security side. Um, and really just focusing on as many layers as you can to protect from as many threats as cost effectively as possible. Then you have places like us here at Cook Solutions Group where we can do things with a twist and get into some kind of next level protections that utilize some of that layered approach to protect from individual threats as well, if we can get into some of our specific protections.
Yeah, I would definitely love to talk more about some of your specific protections. Like, where, for example, can I find out more about all these types of ATM threats and preventions from Cook Solutions Group? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so our website, www.cooksolutionsgroup.com. I know it's a long one, but
Hmm.
cooksolutionsgroup.com. We have blogs and articles and documents that we're happy to share. Whether it's a customer of Cook or not, like we want to help protect the industry, the ATM industry as well. So we're happy to have the conversation. And because we see so much of it as a service provider, we see so much of it, we're happy to share those conversations. You can reach out to us on our website. There's a chat button. You can ask for more information if you don't know. If you're a customer of ours or a bank or a credit union that has a relationship with us, you can always reach out to, through your account managers or whatever. But just go into our website and requesting more information. And we're happy to share with you documents that we have, things that you just need to do. If you're a bank or a credit union, you should be concerned about this, and just things that we will share with you on how to questions to ask your service provider, questions to ask your IT. Like,
Right.
who do I think if I could sum this up, for years we've seen ATMs be a separate channel, and be managed completely different than any other IT devices in a bank or a credit union. However, they're a
Mm.
Windows device that's connected to this safe with a lot of cash in it, right? And so bringing in IT, I mean, we appreciate when when an IT department gets on a phone call with us and grills us and asks us these questions to make sure, that because ultimately they're responsible for these devices, make sure that they're protected on all
Right.
of these different layers. We're happy to have that conversation and just help guide through that whole process.
Absolutely. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we sign off today, Levi and Michael?
I think maybe just a couple of the solutions that we have that are related to the fraud space, that kind of make us stand out a little bit and are relevant to these protections.
Mm-hmm.
The first one thing that we've kind of put together just in the last couple of days is ATM configuration monitoring, and this is one of those things, leverages our remote view platform, and because of these RMS and hard drive attacks where they're reconfiguring the ATM, we are able to monitor those configs, and if it changes to an unknown IP address, right, we've got a national footprint, so we've got a pretty good list of known IPs for the different hosts. And if we see an unrecognized IP show up in one of these configs, or certain things going from on to off like TLS, we can send an alert to our team to respond. We've got another series of products called suspicious activity notification, and it's kind of looking at the skimmer install type of fraud, and really approaching that problem from two sides of that one coin. So the first is the skimmer install. Instead of trying to detect that on the hardware, we use smart camera analytics to evaluate the behavior of the human in front of the ATM, and then utilize that info to compare it to the transactions that are taking place on the machine and say, is this somebody just taking a long time to do a transaction, or are they doing something nefarious? And then using a human being to kind of review that footage and make a determination. And we've had dozens of skimmer devices that made it past all the other manufacturer detections and preventions, deep insert skimmers making it past the passive plates or the anti-skimming devices, but getting caught by our suspicious activity notification and catching that skimmer install. And then from the other side of skimming is addressing the cache harvesting, right? We've already stolen the card numbers.
Exactly.
Now we're doing the cache harvest. We use a thing called a fraud detection engine that monitors certain types of transaction sets. Somebody that's just rapid firing nothing but withdrawals, 5 withdrawals in 4 minutes, and sending an alert. And then you can either respond to the alert or automatically take your machine out of service for 10 minutes, interrupt that cache harvesting cycle. And we've had real world wins with both of those, where we've seen a pre-suspicious activity notification and post able to interrupt those cache harvesting cycles and detect those skimmers being installed, that have been hugely successful. Again, across the nation with multiple financial institutions.
Yeah, that's taken Michael's team to 24/7 within the NOC to review that. So, we used to be like 8 to 8, and then 7 to 10, and then 5 to 10, and now we're 24/7. And for the for the thousands of false alarms that we see, hey, that's just somebody standing there for too long at the machine. We call it a win when we see and have been able to stop and prevent hundreds of ATM attacks for all of our customers. So
excellent. Well, this was a really great conversation. I want to thank you, Levi and Michael, for joining us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.